She watched her husband's face turn from triumph to terror in exactly 12 seconds. That's how long it took the judge to read 3 sentences from her father's will. Andrew thought he'd planned everything perfectly: the affair, the prenup, the systematic transfer of assets. He'd spent 3 years turning Victoria into a ghost in her own life, until the moment she stopped being invisible. Her name is Victoria Hayes, and this isn't a story about revenge. It's about the daughter of a janitor who everyone underestimated, including herself. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how Victoria ended up in that courtroom, watching her husband's carefully constructed world collapse, you have to understand where she came from. You have to understand the house on Maple Street and the man who raised her there. Victoria's earliest memory was of her father's hands. Thomas Hayes had the hands of a working man, calloused palms, fingers stained with machine oil that never quite washed clean, nails trimmed short because long nails got caught in machinery. But those hands were gentle when they braided her hair before school, patient when they taught her to ride a bike, steady when they held her after her mother died. Thomas Hayes worked as a maintenance supervisor at Riverside Manufacturing, a small plant that made industrial parts. He started as a janitor when he was 22, fresh out of technical school, and worked his way up over 30 years. He wore the same navy blue work uniform every day. He packed the same lunch every morning, a sandwich and an apple and a thermos of coffee. He drove a 15-year-old pickup truck that he maintained himself in the garage behind their house. Their house sat on the eastern edge of town, where the residential streets gave way to undeveloped land. It was a modest 2-story structure built in the 1950s. White paint that always seemed to need refreshing, a front porch with a swing that creaked when you sat on it, a kitchen with yellow linoleum floors and appliances that Thomas kept running long past their expected lifespan. Victoria's mother, Caroline, had died in a car accident when Victoria was 10. It happened on a Tuesday evening in November, raining hard, visibility almost zero. A truck ran a red light at the intersection of Main and Oak. The police said Caroline died instantly. They said she didn't suffer. Thomas never remarried, never even dated. He poured all his love into raising Victoria. He taught her to be self-sufficient, how to change a tire, how to balance a checkbook, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to stand up for herself, how to question authority, how to think critically. He taught her that education was the key to everything, that books were windows into other lives. That knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take from you. But what Thomas never taught Victoria, what he kept hidden until after his death, was that he was brilliant with money. Caroline had come from oil wealth. Her grandfather, William Fletcher, had struck oil in West Texas in 1923. The Fletcher family had been wealthy for 3 generations by the time Caroline was born. But Caroline hated the pretension of wealth, hated the country clubs and the society parties, and the way money made people act superior. When she met Thomas Hayes at a community college night class, she fell in love with his authenticity, his lack of pretense, the way he treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were a CEO or a custodian. They married against her family's wishes. Her parents threatened to cut her off. She told them to go ahead. When her parents died in a plane crash in 1992, Caroline inherited everything: $7 million, oil royalties that generated income every quarter, real estate holdings across Texas. She and Thomas made a decision. They would live on his salary and invest hers. They would raise their daughter to understand the value of work, to appreciate what she had, to never take anything for granted. Thomas proved to have a natural talent for investing. He read everything he could find about the stock market. He studied company reports. He learned to identify undervalued assets. In 1997, he bought shares of a small online bookstore called Amazon. People thought he was crazy. Why would anyone buy books online when they could go to a bookstore? In 2000, during the dot-com crash, he bought more. In 2003, he bought Apple stock when everyone said the company was finished. In 2004, Google. In 2006, a new company called Facebook. He held everything. Never sold in a panic, never chased trends, just steady, patient, intelligent investing over 3 decades. By the time Caroline died in 1996, their investments had grown to over $4 million. Thomas kept working, kept wearing his uniform, kept driving his old truck, kept living in the same house. He used some of the money to pay off the mortgage, some to set up a trust for Victoria's education, some to buy more land adjacent to their property, parcels that came up for sale over the years, quietly extending their holding to 40 acres. But he never told Victoria any of this. Victoria grew up thinking they were poor, not desperately poor, but working-class poor. The kind of poor where you bought clothes at thrift stores and clipped coupons and ate dinner at home every night because restaurants were too expensive. She got a partial scholarship to State University and worked 3 part-time jobs to cover the rest. She studied English literature because she loved books, not because it was practical. She graduated with honors and $20,000 in student loans. She became a teacher because she wanted to do what her father had done: help people, make a difference, give back. She moved back into her childhood home because she couldn't afford rent anywhere else on a teacher's salary of $40,000 a year. Thomas was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2016. He'd never smoked, but years of exposure to industrial chemicals and cleaning solvents had taken their toll. The cancer was aggressive, stage 4 by the time they caught it. He fought it for 2 years with chemotherapy and radiation and experimental treatments that Victoria believed drained his savings, though she'd later discover he'd protected his investments separately in trusts she knew nothing about. She watched her father waste away, watched him lose his hair and his weight and his strength, watched him become a shadow of the man who taught her to ride a bike and braid her hair. He died in April 2018 on a Saturday morning, with Victoria holding his hand. His last words to her were, "You're stronger than you know, Vicky. Trust yourself." She thought he was just being a dad, being encouraging. She didn't know he was giving her instructions. After the funeral, Victoria fell into a depression. She went through the motions of living. She taught her classes, she graded papers. She came home to the empty house and sat in her father's chair and tried to understand how to keep going. Her friend Rachel, another teacher at Roosevelt High, dragged her to a hospital fundraiser 6 months later. "Come on, Vicky, you can't hide in that house forever. Your dad wouldn't want that. He'd want you to live." Victoria went because it was easier than arguing. She wore a black dress she'd bought for the funeral. She drank cheap wine and made small talk with strangers and wished she was home. That's when she met Andrew Thornton. Andrew was standing by the bar talking to a group of people who seemed to hang on his every word. He was tall, well-dressed, confident in the way that comes from never having been told no. He had dark hair going silver at the temples, expensive glasses, a watch that probably cost more than Victoria's car. Though he saw her standing alone and walked over. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said, handing her a glass of wine. She laughed because it was true. "I'm not really a fundraiser person," she admitted. "I'm a teacher. I spend my days with teenagers. Adult conversation feels weird." He smiled. "A teacher. That's refreshing. Everyone here is in healthcare administration or finance. It's all very boring. What do you teach?" "English literature. AP seniors mostly. Even better. Someone who actually contributes to society instead of just shuffling money around." She should have seen it then. The way he positioned himself as different from the others. The way he made her feel special. The way he said exactly what she needed to hear. But she was lonely and grieving, and when he asked for her number, she gave it to him. The courtship was intense. Andrew called the next day, and the day after that. He sent flowers to the school, expensive arrangements that made the other teachers whisper. He took her to restaurants where the menu didn't have prices, where the waiters knew wine pairings, and the chef came out to describe each dish. He took her to the symphony, to art galleries, to his family's lake house, a sprawling property with a private dock and a boat, and a view that looked like something from a magazine. He introduced her to a world where people summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen, where conversations revolved around stock portfolios and real estate investments, and which charity galas were worth attending. Victoria felt like an imposter. She didn't know which fork to use, didn't recognize the names of wines, didn't understand the casual references to places and people and things that everyone else seemed to know instinctively. But Andrew was patient, almost too patient. He'd explain things in a way that felt educational rather than condescending. He'd laugh off her mistakes as charming. He'd tell her she was refreshing because she wasn't jaded by wealth. But here's what Victoria didn't tell anyone at the time, what she barely admitted to herself. She was uncomfortable the entire time, not just because of the wealth and sophistication, but because something felt performative about Andrew. Like he was playing a role. She'd catch him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't read, calculating, assessing, like he was measuring something. When he proposed after 4 months, it was at the lake house at sunset with champagne and a ring that sparkled like a small star. Victoria, you've brought something into my life I didn't know I was missing. Authenticity, realness, heart. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? She hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel the wrongness of the moment. But then she thought about the empty house on Maple Street. Thought about eating dinner alone every night. Thought about grading papers until midnight with no one to talk to. Thought about her father's last words, trust yourself. Maybe trusting herself meant trusting that someone could love her. Maybe trusting herself meant saying yes to happiness. She said yes. Rachel was the only person who questioned it. They were in Rachel's apartment. It's a cramped one-bedroom above a dry cleaner that always smelled faintly of chemicals. Rachel poured cheap wine into mismatched glasses and said, "Vicky, you barely know him. You've been dating 4 months. That's nothing. That's not enough time to really know someone. Why is he rushing? What's the hurry?" Victoria felt defensive. Why does there have to be something wrong? Why can't it just be that he loves me? Because people who are secure in their love don't rush, Rachel said quietly. They don't need to lock it down in 4 months. They're confident enough to take their time. And another thing, this whole fairy tale thing, the expensive restaurants, the lake house, the whirlwind romance, it feels like a sales pitch, like he's selling you something. Victoria stood up, angry now. You're jealous. You're alone, and you're jealous that I found someone? That's what this is really about. Rachel's face fell. Vicky, that's not fair. I'm your friend. I'm worried about you. I think you're still grieving your dad, and this guy showed up at the perfect time and swept you off your feet, and you're not thinking clearly. I am thinking clearly, Victoria said, grabbing her coat. And I'm getting married. You can either be happy for me or not. That's up to you. She left, slammed the door, drove home angry, told herself Rachel was wrong, told herself she was just being protective, told herself everything was fine. The wedding was small, intimate, Andrew called it. They got married at a boutique hotel downtown, 50 guests. Andrew's family, colleagues from the hospital, a few of his friends. On Victoria's side, just Rachel. That's who came despite their argument, and Margaret Stevens from school, and a handful of other teachers. Andrew had insisted on one thing. No one from Victoria's father's side of the family. It's our day, Victoria. Let's keep it intimate. Just our closest people. We don't need people you haven't seen in years showing up just for the free meal. Your father's cousins. Did you even know them? Did they come to his funeral? No. So, why invite them to our wedding? Victoria agreed because he was right. Her father's family had been distant. His cousins lived in other states. They'd sent cards when Thomas died, but hadn't come to the funeral. Why would they come to her wedding? What she didn't realize was that Andrew was cutting her off, erasing anyone who might have known her before him, and anyone who might have known about her father's property or investments, anyone who might have asked questions. The day after the wedding, Andrew brought up selling the house. They were having breakfast in bed, the Sunday paper spread around them, coffee cooling on the nightstand. Victoria, we should talk about the house on Maple Street. That house holds Victoria, interrupting. I know, memories, but maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's too painful for you to keep living there. Surrounded by reminders of your father, your mother, all that grief. We could sell it, buy something new, something that's ours. Start fresh. Victoria's chest tightened. That house is all I have left of them. That house is where I grew up, where my father raised me, where my mother planted her garden. I can't just sell it. Andrew's expression shifted, just for a moment, a flash of something, frustration, anger, but then it was gone, replaced by understanding. Of course, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pushed. We'll keep it. It's important to you, so it's important to me. But she'd seen it, that flash of something else beneath the surface. 3 months into their marriage, Andrew came home early from work. Victoria was at the kitchen table, grading essays on the Great Gatsby. Her students were analyzing the theme of wealth and class and the corruption of the American dream. She'd been struck by how many of them wrote about how money changed people, how the pursuit of wealth destroyed relationships, how the rich looked down on everyone else. Andrew came in with champagne and a folder. "I have incredible news," he said, already opening the bottle before she could respond. "My firm is giving me a major promotion, Vice President of Operations. It's a huge deal, huge salary increase. But there's some paperwork we need to handle. Financial consolidation, tax optimization. You know how it is." Victoria looked up from her essays. "What kind of paperwork? Just standard stuff. Power of attorney for our joint accounts so I can manage everything more efficiently. Beneficiary updates, some asset transfers to take advantage of certain tax structures. My financial advisor says it'll save us tens of thousands in taxes every year." She frowned. "I don't really understand all that. Can I have time to read through it?" "Of course," Andrew said, setting the papers in front of her. "But honestly, it's pretty dense legal language. Even I don't understand half of it, and I work in hospital administration. That's why we pay lawyers and accountants. They know what they're doing." He flipped to the signature pages. "See, you just sign here, and here, and here, initial here, and we're done. Takes 2 minutes. You trust me, don't you?" He said it so casually, like it was the simplest question in the world. Like there was only one acceptable answer. Victoria looked at the papers, at the dense paragraphs of legal text, at the signature lines with little arrows pointing to where she should sign. She thought about her father, about how he'd taught her to read everything carefully, to question, to verify. But she also thought about what her father had said about marriage, about partnership, about trusting the person you love. And she thought about how complicated it all looked, how Andrew was right, she didn't understand tax law. You know, how she'd probably just embarrass herself asking stupid questions. She signed everything he put in front of her: power of attorney, beneficiary forms, asset transfer documents. She barely read them, just signed where he pointed. He kissed her forehead. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is going to make everything so much cleaner. You'll see." 2 weeks later, Victoria needed to file a homeowner's insurance claim. A pipe had burst in the basement, flooding her father's workshop. She'd been devastated. Water had damaged some of his tools, ruined boxes of old papers and photographs. She needed to find their insurance policy to see what was covered. She went to the filing cabinet where Andrew kept all their documents. She found the insurance folder, but as she flipped through it, she found something else: a deed for the house on Maple Street. She pulled it out, confused. The property address was right, 1247 Maple Street, but the owner name was wrong: Andrew Michael Thornton, sole owner, not Victoria Hayes, not Victoria Thornton, not joint tenancy. Andrew's name only. She felt cold. Checked the date. The transfer had been recorded 3 weeks ago, right after she'd signed those papers. She searched through the filing cabinet with shaking hands. Found more documents. A quitclaim deed. Property transfer forms. All with her signature at the bottom. All transferring her house, her father's house, into Andrew's name. When he got home that evening, she was waiting at the kitchen table with the documents spread in front of her. He came in cheerful, loosening his tie, asking what was for dinner. Then he saw her face, saw the papers. His expression barely changed. "What's wrong?" Victoria pointed at the deed. This is wrong. The house is in your name, only your name." Andrew sighed like she was being difficult. "Victoria, we talked about this. It's for tax purposes. Estate planning, asset protection." "What are you talking about? We never talked about this. I would never agree to sign away my house." "You did agree. You signed the documents? Right here, see, that's your signature." He pointed to her signature on the quitclaim deed. "This doesn't mean anything changed really. We're married. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. The title doesn't matter. It's just a piece of paper." "It matters to me," Victoria said. Her voice was shaking. "That house was my father's. It's all I have left of him. You took it from me." "I didn't take anything," Andrew said. His voice had an edge now. "I protected it. I put it in a more secure legal structure. You're being paranoid. You're being emotional. This is exactly why I handle the finances. You don't understand how any of this works." Victoria felt something crack inside her. "You called me emotional. You're making me feel crazy for being upset that you took my house." That's what he was doing, she realized later. Gaslighting, making her doubt her own perception of reality, making her feel stupid for questioning him. But in that moment, she didn't have the words for it. She just felt small. Andrew softened his voice, came around the table, put his hands on her shoulders. Victoria, sweetheart, I love you. I would never do anything to hurt you. Everything I do is for us, for our future together. This house, the finances, all of it. It's ours, together. You have to trust me. Do you trust me? And she did, or she wanted to, or she was too tired to keep fighting. So she nodded. Okay. But it wasn't okay. That was the beginning of the end, though she didn't know it yet. Over the next 2 years, the marriage deteriorated slowly. So slowly that Victoria didn't notice the pattern until much later. Andrew started working late, 3 nights a week, then 4, then most nights. He'd come home at 9 or 10, claiming important meetings, crucial deals, hospital politics that required his attention. His phone was always face down, always on silent. If it buzzed during dinner, he'd grab it immediately, glance at the screen, then step into another room to respond. When Victoria asked about his day, he'd give vague answers. Busy, stressful, you wouldn't understand. It's complicated hospital administration stuff. The romantic gestures stopped. No more flowers, no more surprise dinners, no more weekend trips. They fell into a routine of ships passing in the night. She'd leave for school at 7 in the morning. He'd already be gone. She'd come home at 4. He wouldn't be back until late. They'd eat dinner in silence, watching television, not really talking. The sex stopped too. Andrew was always too tired, too stressed, too preoccupied. When she tried to initiate, he'd say, "Not tonight, Victoria. I've got an early meeting tomorrow. I need to sleep." She told herself it was normal, that all marriages went through phases, that the early passion always faded, that this was just what long-term relationships looked like. But the worst part wasn't the distance. It was the contempt. That's what Margaret would later tell her. The distance is one thing, but contempt is the death of a marriage. Andrew started making comments, little digs that felt like paper cuts. Individual, they seemed almost too small to address. Together, they were bleeding her dry. She'd get dressed for parent-teacher conferences, and he'd say, "You're wearing that? Don't you have anything more professional?" She'd tell him about a lesson that had gone well, and he'd say, "That's nice, sweetheart, but I had to make decisions today that affected the hospital's entire budget." Puts your vocabulary quiz in perspective, doesn't it? She'd mention wanting to pursue her master's degree to become a principal, and he'd pat her head. "Why stress yourself? You're not exactly young anymore, and you're not exactly administrative material. You're good at what you do. Just stick with teaching." But the comments about her father were the worst. Andrew never missed an opportunity to remind Victoria of where she came from. They'd be at dinner parties with his colleagues from the hospital, important people, doctors, administrators, board members. They'd ask Victoria what she did, and before she could answer, Andrew would jump in. "Oh, Victoria's just a teacher. She keeps busy with that while I handle the real work." The way he said "just a teacher" made something inside Victoria shrivel. Or someone would ask about her background, and Andrew would say, "Victoria comes from humble origins. Her father was a janitor, blue-collar, hard worker, but, limited opportunities. Not everyone can have the advantages my family had." He'd say it with a smile, with a tone that suggested he was being understanding. And being generous, being magnanimous for marrying someone beneath his station. But Victoria heard the real message. "You should be grateful I chose you. You should be grateful someone like me would want someone like you." She started to believe it, started to think that maybe she was lucky Andrew had married her, that maybe she should be more appreciative, that maybe her concerns about the house and the distance and the loneliness were just her being ungrateful. At school, she threw herself into teaching. It was the only place she felt valued. Her students didn't care that she wasn't wealthy. They cared that she listened to them, that she believed in them, that she fought for them when others gave up. One student in particular, a girl named Jasmine, was struggling. Jasmine was brilliant, but her home life was chaotic. Her mother worked 3 jobs. Her father was absent. She was raising her younger siblings while trying to maintain a 4.0 GPA. Her essays were stunning, insightful, mature beyond her years. But she was falling asleep in class, missing assignments. Her grades were dropping. Victoria met with Jasmine after school, brought snacks because she suspected the girl wasn't eating enough, asked what was going on. Jasmine broke down. "Miss Hayes, I can't do this anymore. I'm so tired. I'm working 20 hours a week at McDonald's. I'm taking care of my brothers and sisters. I'm trying to keep my grades up for college, but I can't. I just can't. I don't have time, I don't have energy, I don't have anything left. Victoria looked at this girl who reminded her so much of herself at that age, working multiple jobs, trying to succeed, carrying weight that no teenager should have to carry. She said, "What if we found you some help? What if I talked to the counselor about resources for your family? What if we worked out a plan together?" Over the next 3 months, Victoria became Jasmine's advocate. She connected the family with social services, found a scholarship program that provided tutoring and mentorship, worked with Jasmine on a revised schedule that let her complete assignments on a modified timeline, stayed after school twice a week to help her catch up. Slowly, Jasmine stabilized. Her grades improved, her confidence returned. In the spring, Jasmine got accepted to her dream school, Columbia University, with a full scholarship. She came to Victoria's classroom after school with the acceptance letter, crying. She hugged Victoria and said, "Miss Hayes, you saved my life. You never gave up on me when I'd given up on myself. You made me believe I was worth something. This is because of you." Victoria cried too, because moments like this reminded her who she really was beneath all Andrew's put-downs and dismissals. She wasn't just a teacher. She was someone who changed lives. She mattered. But when she told Andrew that evening, excited to share the good news, he barely looked up from his laptop. "That's nice, sweetheart. I'm sure the girl appreciates it. Now, I really need to focus on this budget report. It's due tomorrow, and it's actually important." She left the room and cried in the bathroom. One afternoon in late January, Victoria was in the faculty bathroom during her prep period. She'd just come from a faculty dinner the night before, an event Andrew had insisted they attend even though Victoria had a stack of essays to grade. It had been awful. Andrew's colleagues from the hospital had been there, the chief of surgery and his wife, the head of oncology, the chair of the hospital board. And Andrew had been in rare form, telling stories, making jokes, being charming and sophisticated, until someone asked Victoria what she did. Andrew jumped in before she could answer. "Oh, Victoria's just a teacher. She teaches high school English. It's very sweet. She's very dedicated, but it's not exactly the same as what we do, is it?" Everyone had laughed politely and moved on to other topics. Victoria had excused herself to the kitchen, ostensibly to help with dessert, actually to hide, to breathe, to stop the tears that threatened to spill over. Now, standing in the faculty bathroom, she let herself cry, let out all the hurt and humiliation and loneliness she'd been holding in. That's when Margaret came in. Margaret Stevens was in her mid-50s, with gray hair she didn't bother to dye, and a direct way of speaking that some people found off-putting, but Victoria found refreshing. She'd been the school's guidance counselor for 20 years. She'd seen everything, heard everything, dealt with every possible family situation and student crisis. She took one look at Victoria and locked the bathroom door. "Talk to me," she said, leaning against the sink. "What's going on?" Victoria shook her head. "I'm fine, just tired, emotional. You know how it is." "Bullshit," Margaret said. "I've known you for 5 years, Victoria. You don't cry in bathrooms." "What happened?" Victoria told her. About the dinner party, about Andrew's comment, about how small he made her feel, about how this had been happening for months, years, how every day she felt a little less like herself. Margaret listened without interrupting. When Victoria finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Victoria, I need to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm crazy. But I worked in family law before I became a counselor. I was a paralegal for 15 years. I saw a lot of cases, a lot of divorces, a lot of abuse. And what you're describing, this isn't just a bad marriage. This is financial abuse." Victoria blinked. "What?" "Financial abuse. It's a pattern. The isolation, the control, the erosion of self-esteem, making you question your own worth, making you feel like you should be grateful. And I'm willing to bet there are financial components you haven't even noticed yet. Has he taken control of your assets, made you sign documents, changed account access?" Victoria thought about the house, the papers she'd signed. Margaret saw her face. "Yeah," Margaret said. "That's what I thought. Listen to me carefully. What I'm about to give you is the card of an attorney who specializes in these cases. Her name is Patricia Walters. She's good. She's smart. She's seen this before. I want you to call her. Tell her I sent you. Don't tell your husband. And whatever you do, don't sign anything else. Not without having someone else look at it first. Promise me." Victoria took the card, the name Patricia Walters, a phone number, an address downtown. She didn't think she'd call. She thought Margaret was overreacting, thought she was being paranoid, but she kept the card, tucked it into her wallet where Andrew wouldn't find it. She called 3 days later, from her classroom during lunch, door locked, phone on low volume. Patricia Walters answered on the second ring. Her voice was professional, but warm. "This is Patricia." Victoria almost hung up, almost decided this was crazy. But something about Margaret's expression in that bathroom, the certainty in her voice, made Victoria speak. "My name is Victoria Thornton. Margaret Stevens gave me your number. She said you might be able to help me." "Tell me what's going on," Patricia said. So Victoria told her everything. The whirlwind courtship, the isolation from family, the papers she'd signed without really reading, the house being transferred to Andrew's name, the emotional abuse, the contempt, the feeling that she was disappearing in her own marriage. Patricia listened, asked questions, took notes. When Victoria finished, Patricia said, "Mrs. Thornton, I need to be direct with you. Based on what you're describing, your husband may be planning to file for divorce and claim all marital assets. This is a pattern I've seen many times before. Men, and sometimes women, who target people they perceive as vulnerable. People who have assets but don't realize their value. People who are isolated. People who can be manipulated. The documents you signed likely gave him control of everything, including your inherited property." Victoria's blood went cold. She was standing at the window of her classroom, looking out at the parking lot, watching students heading to lunch. Can he do that? Can he really take everything? If you sign the documents, yes, legally he can. The quitclaim deed on your house is particularly concerning. That was your separate property, inherited. It should have remained yours regardless of the marriage. But if you signed it over to him, even under false pretenses, it's going to be difficult to undo, but not impossible. Victoria felt like she couldn't breathe. "What do I do? Before you panic, I need you to do something for me. I need you to find every document related to your father's estate. Wills, bank statements, property deeds, life insurance policies, anything your father left you, anything he might have set up for your protection. Don't tell your husband you're looking. Don't let him know you're suspicious. Just quietly gather everything you can find and bring it to my office. Can you do that?" "Yes," Victoria said. "When?" "As soon as possible. This week if you can. And Mrs. Thornton, one more thing. Don't sign anything else. Nothing. If your husband asks you to sign documents, tell him you need time to review them. Make excuses. Say you're busy. Say you want to understand what you're signing. But don't sign. Understood?" Understood. That night, Andrew worked late. Again. He called at 7 to say he'd be home around 10. Don't wait up. Victoria used the time to search. She started in the obvious places. The filing cabinet where Andrew kept their documents. She found their tax returns, mortgage statements, investment account summaries, all in Andrew's name. She found the deed to the house, still in Andrew's name. She found life insurance policies. Andrew was the beneficiary on hers. She wasn't even listed on his. She found a prenuptial agreement she didn't remember signing. She read it carefully. It had been signed 3 months after their wedding, not before. The language was dense but clear. In the event of divorce, Victoria would receive a minimal settlement. Andrew would retain all property, including the house on Maple Street. It was unconscionable, but there was her signature at the bottom. She took pictures of everything with her phone, documented what she found, then she moved to the basement, to her father's workshop. She hadn't been down there since the pipe burst, since the flood. Andrew had said he'd cleaned it up, had thrown away anything water damaged, had organized what remained. But Victoria hadn't checked, hadn't wanted to face the space without her father in it. The workshop was exactly as her father had left it. Tools organized by size on pegboards he'd built himself. A workbench worn smooth from years of use. A calendar still showing April 2018, the month he died. His reading glasses on the workbench. A coffee mug with his name on it. The smell of sawdust and machine oil. Victoria sat on the floor and cried. For her father. For the marriage she'd thought she had. For the life she'd thought she was building. For herself. When she was done crying, she started searching, methodically, carefully. She looked in drawers, in toolboxes, behind the pegboard, under the workbench. And that's when she found it, a small gap behind the workbench, so small she almost missed it. But when she shone her phone's flashlight into the space, she saw something, a fireproof box. She pulled it out. It was locked, but taped to the bottom was a key. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Vicky," it began in her father's careful handwriting, the same handwriting from birthday cards and lunch notes, and the letter he'd written her when she graduated high school. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. And if you're looking for this box, something has gone wrong. I need you to know something about your mother and me. We weren't poor. We just lived modestly." Victoria read the letter 3 times. Each time, she understood less and more simultaneously. Less about why her father had kept this secret, more about how carefully he'd protected her. The letter explained everything: her mother's wealth, the trust fund, the investments, the land, the carefully structured legal protections. Her father had been brilliant, not just smart with money, but smart about people. He'd understood that Victoria needed to grow up normal, needed to understand the value of work, needed to choose people based on character, not wealth. But he'd also understood that she might someday need protection, that someone might try to take advantage of her, that she might end up in exactly the situation she was in now. So he'd protected her, set up a trust that couldn't be touched, transferred the property into her name before she met Andrew, left her instructions on what to do if something went wrong. The house you grew up in sits on 40 acres that extends back into undeveloped land. I bought it in 1985 for $50,000. I've had offers as high as $4 million. There's a development company that wants it badly. I've always refused. In this box, you'll find the original property deed in your name only. I transferred it when you turned 31. I did it quietly, through a lawyer. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry about it. I didn't want you to feel the burden of owning something so valuable. But I wanted to make sure it was protected, that no one could take it from you. You'll also find documents for a trust fund containing $3,200,000, accessible only by you. Your mother's family money, invested carefully over the years. I lived on my salary and let the investments grow. Compound interest is a beautiful thing when you have patience and time. The trust is set up so that it can only be accessed by you and only after you turn 30 or in the event of my death, whichever comes first. No one else can touch it. Not a husband. Not a creditor, not anyone. It's yours, protected by law. Stock certificates for companies I've invested in over 30 years. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. I bought them when they were cheap, when everyone said I was crazy to put money into technology. I held on to them. Watched them split and grow and multiply. They're worth more than you can imagine. And a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. In that box, you'll find more documents, more certificates, more protection. Vicky, anyone can love you when they think you have nothing. True character is revealed when they discover you have everything. If someone ever tries to take what's yours, remember, you are my daughter. You are stronger than you know, and you are wealthier than almost anyone realizes. I worked as a janitor. I cleaned floors and emptied trash cans and fixed broken things. People looked down on me. They treated me like I was invisible. But I was smarter than they thought. I was more careful. I planned better. I wanted you to have choices. I wanted you to never feel trapped. I wanted you to know that you could walk away from anything or anyone that didn't treat you with respect. Trust yourself, Vicky. You're smarter than you think you are. You're stronger than you believe. And you're worth more than anyone could ever pay. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Don't let anyone steal what's yours. Fight for yourself, because you're worth fighting for. Love always, Dad. Victoria sat on the basement floor, surrounded by documents that proved she'd been wealthy all along, that her father had loved her enough to plan for a future he wouldn't see, that she wasn't powerless, wasn't dependent, wasn't trapped. She cried again, but this time they were different tears. Not grief, not despair, something else. Relief, gratitude, rage. She heard Andrew's car in the driveway, heard the garage door open. She quickly put everything back in the fireproof box, hid it behind the workbench, wiped her face, climbed the basement stairs. He was in the kitchen when she emerged, loosening his tie, checking his phone. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" "Fine," she said. "How was yours?" Exhausting. Hospital politics, budget meetings, the usual. She watched him, studied him. This man she'd loved, this man she'd trusted, this man who'd been planning to steal from her since the day they met. And she smiled. "I'm tired. I think I'll head to bed." Andrew barely looked up from his phone. "Okay, I'll be up in a bit. I need to respond to some emails." She went upstairs, lay in bed, stared at the ceiling, and started planning. The next morning, she called in sick to school, something she never did unless she was genuinely ill. She needed time, needed space to think. She drove to First National Bank with the key and her father's letter. The safety deposit box contained more documentation, more stock certificates, more investment records. A detailed notebook in her father's handwriting, explaining every investment decision he'd ever made, his philosophy, his strategy, his reasoning. There was also a second letter, shorter than the first. "Vicky, if you've made it this far, you've found everything. You know the truth. You know you're not powerless. Now you need to decide what to do with this information. I can't tell you what choice to make. I can only tell you that you have choices. You can walk away. You can fight. You can negotiate. Whatever you decide, know that I'm proud of you. Know that you're stronger than you thought, braver than you believed, more capable than anyone told you, and you're worth fighting for. Love always, Dad." Victoria sat in the bank's private viewing room and made a decision. She called Patricia Walters. "I found everything," she said. "My father left me a trust, $3 million, stock certificates, and the property deed shows 40 acres in my name, transferred before I even met Andrew." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Thornton, when can you come to my office? We need to talk strategy. This changes everything." They met that afternoon. Patricia's office was downtown, one in a building that overlooked the river. Her desk was organized chaos, stacks of case files, legal pads covered in notes, framed diplomas from law schools Victoria had only heard of in movies. Patricia reviewed every document Victoria brought, read her father's letters, examined the deed, studied the trust documents, reviewed the photographs Victoria had taken of Andrew's files. When she finished, she looked up at Victoria with something like respect. "Your father was brilliant. He set this up perfectly. The trust is ironclad, 100% separate property, established before your marriage, protected by specific legal language that prevents any spouse from claiming it. The property deed is even better. He transferred it to you in 2017, a full year before you met Andrew. There's no way your husband can claim it as a marital asset." Victoria felt a weight lift. "So, I'm protected, you're protected. But here's the situation. Your husband doesn't know any of this. He thinks you're powerless. He thinks he's pulled off the perfect con, and that gives us an enormous advantage." Patricia leaned forward. "Victoria, I need to be direct with you. If your husband learns about these assets before we file for divorce, he'll accelerate his timeline. He'll try to hide money. He'll try to claim community property rights based on the increase in value during the marriage. He'll argue that he contributed to maintenance or improvements that increase the property's worth. He'll do everything he can to muddy the waters. Right now, he thinks he has complete control. He thinks you have nothing. We need to let him keep thinking that. We need to let him make his move. Let him file for divorce. Let him present his settlement offer. Let him think he's winning. And then we ambush him in court. We present evidence of fraud, of the stolen property, of the systematic financial abuse. We show the judge exactly what he's been doing, and we destroy him." Victoria thought about it, about pretending, about continuing to be the submissive wife, about smiling while Andrew made his cutting comments, about signing where he pointed, knowing Patricia would review everything first, about waiting. "It's going to be hard," Patricia said, pretending. "But it's the only way to protect what's yours. If he knows you know, he'll find a way to complicate things. But if we catch him completely off guard, in court, with evidence he doesn't know we have, we win. Decisively." "How long?" Victoria asked. "How long do I have to pretend?" "However long it takes for him to make his move. Based on what you've told me, I don't think it'll be long. He's already positioning for divorce, the separate accounts, the prenup signed after the wedding, the property transfer. He's been building his case. My guess is he'll file within the next few months." Victoria nodded. "Okay. What do I need to do?" "Nothing. That's the beautiful part. You do nothing differently. You go to work, you teach, you come home, you play the perfect wife. If he asks you to sign something, tell him you need a few days to read it. Text me a picture. I'll tell you if it's safe. If he gets suspicious, back off. Act confused. Act emotional. Play into his perception of you as someone who doesn't understand finances. Let him think he's smarter than you. And document everything. Every comment, every interaction, every time he makes you feel small. Keep a journal. Take notes. We're building a case, not just for the divorce, but potentially for criminal charges, fraud, theft, financial elder abuse, criminal charges. If he stole your property through fraudulent means, that's a crime. If he can be prosecuted, we can pursue that. But first, we need to win the divorce. Victoria left Patricia's office with a folder full of documents and a plan. She felt different, stronger, like she'd found something she'd lost, herself. The next 2 months were the hardest of Victoria's life. She went home every day and pretended, smiled when Andrew made his cutting comments, nodded when he explained why she wouldn't understand his work, laughed at his jokes even when they were at her expense. She signed where he pointed, but only after texting Patricia pictures of every document. Most were innocuous, utility transfers, insurance updates, but one was a modification to their prenup that would have given Andrew complete control of any future inheritance Victoria might receive. Patricia told her to refuse, so Victoria did. She said, "I'm sorry, Andrew. I know you think I'm being difficult, but my friend Rachel said I should always read important documents carefully. I just need a few more days." Andrew's jaw tightened. "Your friend Rachel doesn't know anything about legal documents. This is a standard modification. It protects both of us. I know, and I trust you. But I still want to read it. Just give me a few days." He dropped it. But Victoria noticed a change after that, and he watched her more carefully, questioned where she'd been, asked about her conversations with Rachel and Margaret. She realized he was getting nervous, getting suspicious, getting ready to make his move. It happened on a Tuesday evening in late March. Victoria came home from a parent-teacher conference where she'd met with Jasmine's mother to discuss college plans. She was feeling good, proud of the work she'd done, proud of the difference she'd made in a student's life. Andrew was waiting at the kitchen table. He'd made dinner, take-out Thai food from her favorite restaurant, 2 plates, candles, wine. She knew immediately something was wrong. Andrew didn't do romantic gestures anymore. Hadn't in over a year. This was performance. This was setup. She sat down, smiled. "This is nice. What's the occasion?" Andrew took her hand. "Victoria, we need to talk." Her heart started racing, but she kept her face neutral. "About what? About us. About our marriage." He paused, looked down at their joined hands. "Victoria, I think we both know this hasn't been working for a while. We've grown apart. We want different things. We're going in different directions. I've tried. I've really tried. But I think it would be better for both of us if we ended this now. While we can still be civil. While we can still part as friends." "You want a divorce?" Victoria said. Not a question, a statement. Andrew nodded, looked relieved that she understood. "I know this is hard. I know this isn't what you wanted. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we both know this is the right choice." Victoria took a sip of wine, bought herself time to think, to respond the way she needed to respond, to play the role Patricia had told her to play. "I don't understand. What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently?" "Nothing," Andrew said quickly. "This isn't about you. This is about us, about compatibility, about wanting different things from life. You're a teacher, you love your job, you love working with kids, and that's wonderful. But I need a partner who understands my world, who can navigate the social and professional circles I need to be in. Someone who," he paused, "someone more sophisticated." Victoria let tears fill her eyes. Not difficult. The humiliation was real, even if the surprise wasn't. "So, I'm not good enough, not sophisticated enough, not from the right background. That's not what I'm saying. But yes, if I'm being honest, I think I need someone who fits better with my lifestyle. It's someone who comes from a similar background, who understands business and finance and the world I live in. I'm sorry, I know that's hard to hear." Victoria wiped her eyes. "What happens now? I've already spoken to my lawyer. He's drawn up a settlement agreement. It's very fair. More than fair, actually. You'll receive $50,000, your car, your personal possessions. That's enough to get an apartment. Start over. Maybe go back to school if you want. Get your master's degree. Improve your prospects. What about the house? Andrew's expression barely flickered. Technically, it's in my name, but we'll need to sell it to divide the marital assets fairly. The settlement accounts for that. You'll get your share from the sale. Victoria nodded slowly. Can I see the settlement? Of course. He pulled out a folder. The same way he'd presented the other documents, the same confidence, the same certainty that she'd sign. Victoria opened it, read carefully. The settlement gave her $50,000, her 10-year-old Honda Civic, her personal possessions, meaning her clothes and books and teaching materials. Andrew would keep the house, the investment accounts, his retirement fund, his pension, everything. The house would be sold, and after paying off the mortgage, which Victoria now knew didn't exist because her father had owned the property outright, the proceeds would go to Andrew as compensation for his financial contributions to the marriage. It was robbery dressed up as generosity. This seems unbalanced, Victoria said carefully. Andrew sighed, like she was being difficult, like she was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. Victoria, be realistic. You contributed almost nothing financially to this marriage. You made, $40,000 a year teaching? That's nothing. I paid for everything. The mortgage, the cars, the insurance, the vacations, everything. This settlement gives you far more than you're legally entitled to. I'm being generous, more than generous. What about my father's house? Victoria asked. Technically, it's our house now, Andrew said. Community property. Arizona is a community property state. Everything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50. But, like I said, the settlement accounts for that. You're getting a very fair deal. Victoria looked at her husband. This man she'd loved. This man she'd trusted with her heart and her future and her father's legacy. This man who'd spent 3 years systematically stealing from her while making her feel worthless. And she smiled. I need to think about it. Andrew's expression tightened. Victoria, there's nothing to think about. My lawyer says we should file by the end of the month. The sooner we do this, the cleaner it'll be for both of us. Then I guess you should get a better lawyer. What? Victoria stood up, took her plate to the sink. Because if your lawyer thinks I'm going to sign away my father's house for $50,000, he's an idiot. And if you think I'm that stupid, you never knew me at all. Andrew stood too. His face was red. Victoria, you're being emotional. You're not thinking clearly. Let me explain this to you in terms you'll understand. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, Victoria said. And I understand perfectly. You want a divorce. Is it fine? File for divorce. But I'm not signing anything until I have my own lawyer review it. You can't afford a lawyer. Watch me. She walked out of the kitchen, went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, called Patricia. He just served me, she said. Verbally. He's got documents. He wants me to sign. Did you sign? No. I told him I needed my own lawyer. Patricia laughed. Good. That's perfect. He's going to panic now. He's going to wonder what you know. He's going to rush. And when people rush, they make mistakes. What do I do now? Nothing. Go to work tomorrow, live your life, let him file. He'll probably do it this week. And when he does, we respond, we file our counter petition, we present our evidence, and we take him apart piece by piece. The next few days were tense. Andrew barely spoke to her. He moved into the guest bedroom, then started staying even later at work. Victoria could feel his anger, his frustration, his confusion about why she wasn't rolling over the way he'd expected. A week later, Victoria was served with divorce papers at school. A process server came to her classroom during her lunch period, knocked on the door, asked if she was Victoria Hayes Thornton, handed her an envelope. She signed for it, opened it. The petition for dissolution of marriage was filed by Andrew Michael Thornton. The grounds were irreconcilable differences. The proposed settlement was exactly what he'd described. $50,000, her car, the house to be sold, with proceeds going primarily to Andrew. Victoria called Patricia. I've been served. Come to my office after school. Bring the papers. We need to file our response. That afternoon, sitting in Patricia's office, as Victoria watched as Patricia drafted their counter petition, she included everything. The property deed showing Victoria as the sole owner since 2017. The trust documents showing $3 million in separate property. The fraudulent title transfer. The prenup signed after the wedding under false pretenses. the systematic financial abuse, the recorded conversation between Andrew and his friend discussing the plan to defraud Victoria. "Wait," Victoria said. "What recorded conversation?" Patricia smiled. "Did I forget to mention that? 3 weeks ago, I hired a private investigator. He's been following your husband, documenting his activities, recording his conversations in public places where there's no expectation of privacy. Your husband had a very interesting conversation with a colleague at a bar downtown. Very interesting." She pulled out her phone, pressed play. Andrew's voice filled the office, clear and unmistakable. She signed over the house without even reading the documents. God, she's so trusting, it's pathetic. I told her it was for taxes, and she just signed. Didn't even ask questions. Didn't even read the fine print. When we divorce, I'll sell that property for millions, and she'll never know what it was worth. She still thinks it's just some old house on a small lot. She has no idea the land goes back 40 acres. She has no idea what developers would pay for it. Another man's voice. "So, what's your timeline?" "I'm serving her next week. My lawyer says we can fast track it. She'll get $50,000 and her piece of shit car, and I'll get everything else. The house, the land, all of it. She doesn't even have her own lawyer. She thinks I'm being generous. She thinks I'm being fair. She actually thanked me for handling everything so she wouldn't have to deal with the stress." Andrew's voice again, dripping with contempt. "That's the beautiful part. She thinks I'm doing her a favor. She thinks I'm being kind. She has no idea I've been planning this since before we got married. She has no idea that every single thing I've done for the past 3 years has been leading to this moment." "How did you get this?" Victoria whispered. "Public place. One-party consent state. Perfectly legal and perfectly damning. We're including it as evidence, along with everything else." Patricia looked at Victoria. "Are you ready for this? Once we file, there's no going back. He's going to know that you know everything. He's going to know he's caught. This is going to get ugly. I'm ready." And Victoria said, "Good, because we're going to destroy him." The divorce hearing was scheduled for October 15th at 9 in the morning in Judge Catherine Morrison's courtroom. Victoria barely slept the night before. She kept thinking about her father, about how he'd protected her, about how he'd known, somehow, that she might need this protection someday. She wished he could be there, wished she could thank him, wished she could tell him that she understood now, understood why he'd lived the way he did, why he'd kept the secret, why he'd planned so carefully. She arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. Patricia was waiting on the steps, wearing a navy suit and carrying 2 briefcases. "You ready?" Patricia asked. Victoria nodded. "Let's do this." Andrew arrived at 8:45 with his attorney, Richard Sterling. And Sterling was a partner at Crawford, Mitchell and Sterling, one of the city's most expensive firms. He wore a suit that probably cost $3,000. He carried 3 monogrammed briefcases, probably to make himself look more important. Andrew wore his best suit, the navy one he saved for important meetings. He'd gotten a haircut. He looked successful, polished, like a man who had his life together. He saw Victoria and smiled, not warmly, more like a predator that had cornered its prey. They entered the courtroom. Judge Catherine Morrison's courtroom was on the 3rd floor, wood paneling, high ceilings, rows of benches for observers. Margaret was there, sitting in the back. She'd taken a personal day to come. Rachel was there too, despite everything, despite the fight they'd had. She'd come to support Victoria. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. She had people on her side. She wasn't alone. All rise for the Honorable Judge Catherine Morrison. Everyone stood as Judge Morrison entered. She was exactly as Victoria had read about her. Steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, sharp eyes that missed nothing, an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick and heard every lie and had no patience for games. Judge Morrison settled into her chair, adjusted her reading glasses, opened the case file. We're here for the dissolution of marriage between Andrew Michael Thornton and Victoria Hayes Thornton. She looked up, scanned the room. Her gaze lingered on Andrew, then moved to Victoria, then back to the lawyers. I've reviewed the preliminary filings. This appears to be a contested divorce with significant disputed assets. Mr. Sterling, you're representing the petitioner? Yes, Your Honor. Richard Sterling stood, all polished confidence. And Mrs. Walters, you're representing the respondent. Yes, Your Honor. Patricia stood, much less flash, much more substance. Mr. Sterling, please present your case. Sterling walked to the podium, arranged his notes, smiled at the judge like they were old friends. Your Honor, this is a straightforward dissolution of a 3-year marriage. My client, Mr. Thornton, has offered a generous settlement to Mrs. Thornton, despite her minimal financial contributions to the marriage. Mr. Thornton is a hospital administrator with a 6-figure salary. He purchased the marital home. He maintained all marital assets. He paid all bills and expenses. Mrs. Thornton is a high school teacher, earning approximately $40,000 annually. She contributed minimally to the household finances. My client is offering her $50,000 in cash, her vehicle, and her personal possessions. This is more than fair given her lack of financial contribution. Furthermore, the marital home will be sold and proceeds divided according to a prenuptial agreement that both parties signed. My client is being extraordinarily generous. In fact, I'd argue he's being too generous. Mrs. Thornton will receive enough money to rent an apartment and start fresh. She'll be able to move on with her life. My client simply wants to resolve this matter quickly and amicably. He paused, looked at Victoria with something like pity. Your Honor, my client married Mrs. Thornton in good faith. He believed they would build a life together. But it became clear over time that they wanted fundamentally different things, different lifestyles, different social circles, different aspirations. This is no one's fault. It's simply incompatibility. My client is trying to do the right thing by offering a fair settlement that will allow both parties to move forward. Judge Morrison looked up from her notes. Mr. Sterling, you mentioned a prenuptial agreement. Yes, Your Honor. When was this agreement signed? Sterling checked his notes. 3 months after the wedding, Your Honor. But it was a postnuptial agreement that both parties signed voluntarily. Judge Morrison's eyebrow raised slightly. A postnuptial agreement signed 3 months into the marriage. What prompted that? My client wanted to ensure that assets were properly protected for estate planning purposes. And Mrs. Thornton agreed. She signed the document? Yes, Your Honor, I see. Judge Morrison made a note, looked at Victoria. Mrs. Thornton, how do you respond to this petition? Victoria started to stand, but Patricia put a hand on her arm. I've got this. Patricia stood, adjusted her jacket, walked to the podium with one briefcase. Your Honor, we have significant issues with the proposed settlement. She opened her briefcase, pulled out a document. First, there is no valid prenuptial agreement. The document Mr. Sterling refers to was not a prenuptial agreement, as those by definition must be signed before marriage. This was a postnuptial agreement signed 3 months after the wedding that Mrs. Thornton was told was routine tax paperwork. She was not advised of its contents. She was not told to seek independent legal counsel. She was deliberately misled about what she was signing. The document is invalid. Sterling jumped to his feet. That's absurd, Your Honor. Mrs. Thornton signed the document willingly. She had every opportunity to read what she was signing. The fact that she chose not to doesn't invalidate her signature. She signed under duress and false pretenses, Patricia said calmly. Mr. Thornton told her she was signing tax documents and beneficiary updates. He specifically told her the documents were routine. He discouraged her from reading them by suggesting they were too complex for her to understand. That's fraud. But more importantly, Your Honor, we need to address the matter of the marital home. Patricia pulled out another document, walked it to the judge's bench. Your Honor, Mr. Thornton claims the marital home located at 1247 Maple Street is a marital asset purchased during the marriage. This is false, completely, demonstrably false. The property known as 1247 Maple Street, including the house and surrounding 40 acres, has been in Mrs. Thornton's family since 1985. It was purchased by her father, Thomas Hayes, for $50,000. Mr. Hayes owned the property outright, free and clear, for 33 years. In 2017, 1 full year before Mrs. Thornton met Mr. Thornton, Thomas Hayes transferred the property to his daughter as a gift. The deed is here, recorded with the county. Mrs. Thornton was the sole owner of this property when she married Mr. Thornton. It was her separate property, her inheritance, protected by law. Andrew went pale, invisibly pale, like someone had drained the blood from his face. Sterling started flipping frantically through his files. Furthermore, Patricia continued, Mr. Thornton fraudulently transferred the property title to his own name by misleading Mrs. Thornton about the nature of documents she was signing. 3 months into their marriage, he presented her with what he claimed were tax documents and power of attorney forms. In reality, they were quit-claim deeds transferring her property to him. He deliberately deceived her. He deliberately stole her property. This is not a civil matter, Your Honor. This is theft by deception. Judge Morrison's expression had gone from neutral to stone cold. She looked at Sterling. Mr. Sterling, did your client transfer property that belongs solely to his wife into his own name? Sterling was sweating now, whispering urgently with Andrew. Your Honor, my client was acting in good faith to consolidate marital assets for tax and estate planning purposes. This is a common practice in marriages. That's not what I asked, Judge Morrison said. Her voice was ice. Did he or did he not transfer sole ownership property that belonged to his wife into his own name? Yes or no? Sterling swallowed hard. The title was transferred, yes, but the intention was always to benefit the marriage as a whole. My client had no fraudulent intent. He was simply trying to streamline their financial affairs for the benefit of both parties. There is no but, counselor. Judge Morrison's voice could have cut glass. Either your client transferred property that belonged to his wife, knowing it belonged to his wife, or he didn't. Which is it? The title was transferred from Mrs. Fifth Thornton to Mr. Thornton. Yes. Then we have a problem. Judge Morrison turned to Andrew. Mr. Thornton, stand up. Andrew stood. He looked genuinely scared now. His confidence was completely gone. His hands were shaking. He looked like a man who just realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. Mr. Thornton, did you know this property belonged to your wife when you transferred the title? Did you know it was her separate property? Did you know it had been deeded to her by her father before you even met her? Andrew opened his mouth, closed it. His lawyer was frantically whispering to him, but Andrew just stood there, frozen. Your Honor, he finally said, his voice shaking. It was complicated. The property was... This is not complicated, Judge Morrison interrupted. This is very simple. Did you know this property belongs solely to your wife when you transferred the title into your own name? Yes or no, Mr. Thornton? I am losing patience. Andrew looked at his lawyer, at Victoria, at the judge, at the door like he was considering running. Yes, he finally whispered, I knew. Then you committed fraud, Judge Morrison said. You knowingly and deliberately transferred property that did not belong to you into your own name. You stole from your wife. Sit down. Andrew sat down hard, like his legs had given out. Your Honor, Sterling tried. There were extenuating circumstances. There were reasons for. I don't want to hear it, Judge Morrison snapped. Not yet. Mrs. Walters, do you have more? Patricia smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Your Honor, there's much more. Mrs. Thornton's father was not just a careful man. He was a brilliant man. He understood that his daughter might someday need protection, so he set up that protection before he died. She pulled out more documents. Your Honor, Thomas Hayes established a substantial trust fund for his daughter's protection in 2015, 3 years before Mrs. Thornton met Mr. Thornton. The trust contains $3,200,000 in cash and securities. It is structured as separate property, completely protected from any marital claims. The trust documents explicitly state that the assets can only be accessed by Victoria Hayes and are not subject to division in the event of divorce. The courtroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Andrew looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Sterling dropped his pen. It clattered on the table. That's impossible, Andrew finally managed to say. His voice was strangled. Her father was a janitor. He cleaned floors. He emptied trash cans. He drove a piece of shit truck. He lived in that tiny house. He was nobody. How could he possibly have that kind of money? Her father, Patricia said, her voice cold and sharp, was a maintenance supervisor who inherited money from his wife's family. He was smart enough to invest it wisely over 30 years. He bought stock in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google when everyone said he was crazy. He held those investments and watched them grow. He lived modestly because he wanted his daughter to grow up understanding the value of work. He wanted her to choose people based on character, not wealth. He was smarter in one day than your client will be in his entire life, Mr. As Sterling. Unlike your client, Thomas Hayes actually loved his daughter. He protected her. He planned for her future. He made sure she would never be trapped or powerless, or at the mercy of someone like your client. Your Honor, Sterling said desperately, standing up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. We were never informed of these assets during discovery. This is new information that should have been disclosed. This is highly irregular. We have a right to examine these claims before. Because they're not marital assets, Judge Morrison interrupted. They belong solely to Mrs. Thornton. They were established before the marriage. They are explicitly protected from marital claims. They are irrelevant to the division of marital property. The only reason Mrs. Walters is presenting them now is to establish context, to show that your client was attempting to defraud someone with substantial independent wealth, to show that he married her thinking she was poor and powerless when she was actually wealthier than he ever was, or ever will be. She looked at Andrew with open disgust, undisguised contempt. Mr. Thornton, I have been on the bench for 23 years. I have presided over hundreds of divorces. I have seen people fight over houses and cars and bank accounts and retirement funds. I have seen adultery and abandonment and every form of cruelty one spouse can inflict on another. But what you did, she paused, leaned forward. This is one of the most calculating, most deliberate, most cold-blooded cases of financial abuse I have encountered in my entire career. You didn't just marry this woman. You targeted her. You researched her. You identified her as someone vulnerable, someone isolated, someone grieving, someone who could be manipulated. You spent 3 years systematically breaking her down, making her feel worthless, making her believe she was lucky you married her. You isolated her from her friends. You mocked her career. You made her sign away her property under false pretenses. You stole her inheritance. And then you planned to divorce her and take everything while making her thank you for the privilege. This wasn't a marriage, Mr. Thornton. This was a con game. And you, sir, are nothing more than a con artist. But, Your Honor, Sterling tried. Patricia wasn't finished. Your Honor, there's one more piece of evidence the court needs to hear. One more piece that makes Mr. Thornton's intent absolutely clear, beyond any possible doubt. She pulled out her phone, placed it on the evidence table. 3 weeks ago, our private investigator documented a conversation between Mr. Thornton and his colleague, Brian Matthews, at Sullivan's Bar downtown. This is a public establishment where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy. The recording is completely legal under Arizona law. In this conversation, Mr. Thornton explicitly discusses his plan to defraud Mrs. Thornton. He discusses how he manipulated her, how he made her sign documents without reading them, how he planned to sell her property for millions while giving her almost nothing. He discusses his true intentions for the marriage, and he does so in language that leaves absolutely no doubt about his fraudulent intent. Sterling jumped to his feet. Your Honor, I object strenuously. We were never informed of any recording. This is a clear violation of discovery rules. This evidence should be excluded. This is highly prejudicial, and... Is this a one-party consent state? Judge Morrison asked Patricia. Yes, Your Honor. In Arizona, only one party to a conversation needs to consent to recording. The investigator who made this recording was present in the bar. He consented. The recording is completely legal. Then I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. She looked at Sterling. Sit down, counselor. Your objection is noted and overruled. Play the recording, Mrs. Walters. Patricia pressed play. Andrew's voice filled the courtroom, loud and clear and absolutely unmistakable. She signed over the house without even reading the documents. God, she's so trusting, it's pathetic. I told her it was for taxes and she just signed. Didn't even ask questions. Didn't even read the fine print. I mean, who does that? Who signs away their house without reading? When we divorce, I'll sell that property for millions and she'll never know what it was worth. She still thinks it's just some old house on a small lot. She has no idea the land goes back 40 acres. She has no idea what developers would pay for it. There's a project going in next to it. Mixed-use development, shopping, condos. That land is going to be worth $5, maybe $6 million in 2 years. And she'll never know. Another man's voice, presumably Brian Matthews. Jesus, Andrew, that's cold even for you. Andrew laughed, a sound without warmth, without humor, just cruelty. So, what's your timeline? I'm serving her next week. My lawyer says we can fast-track it since there are no kids. She'll get $50,000 in her piece of shit Honda, and I'll get everything else. The house, the land, my retirement accounts that she thinks are ours. All of it. She doesn't even have her own lawyer. She told me she can't afford one. She actually believes that I'm being generous. She thinks I'm being fair. She thanked me. She actually thanked me for handling everything so she wouldn't have to deal with the stress of divorce. Can you believe that? That's the best part, Andrew's voice continued. She thinks I'm doing her a favor. She thinks I'm being kind. She thinks I'm a good guy who's just trying to make a difficult situation easier. She has no idea I've been planning this since before we got married. She has no idea that every single thing I've done for the past 3 years, every dinner, every gift, every kind word has been leading to this moment. The moment I cash out and walk away with millions. You should get an award for this performance, the other voice said. 3 years of pretending to love someone. That takes commitment. It's not that hard, Andrew said. You just have to remember what you're getting out of it. Every time she bored me with stories about her students, I thought about that land. Every time I had to sit through another pathetic dinner at that house with the peeling paint, I thought about the money. Every time I had to pretend to care about her feelings, I reminded myself it was temporary, an investment, and investments pay off. What about the father? The guy must have had other assets. Did he? Andrew laughed again. That's the beautiful part. He was a janitor, lived in that shitty house, drove a truck older than I am. Just died with medical bills he couldn't pay. Victoria thinks she inherited debt. She doesn't even know about the land value, doesn't even know the property goes back 40 acres. Her father never told her, and I made sure she never found out, kept her busy, kept her distracted, kept her feeling grateful that someone like me would marry someone like her. She actually believes she's lucky. Lucky, can you imagine? Believing you're lucky to be married to someone planning to rob you? That's some next-level stupidity right there. The recording continued for another 30 seconds. More laughter. More cruel comments, more evidence of Andrew's complete contempt for Victoria. When it ended, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. No one moved, no one spoke, no one even seemed to breathe. Andrew looked like he might vomit. His face had gone from pale to gray. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hands were shaking. He looked at his lawyer, at Victoria, at the judge, at the door, anywhere but at the faces staring at him with disgust. Your Honor, he finally managed to whisper. His voice was barely audible. I can explain. That recording is out of context. I was drinking, I was exaggerating, I was trying to impress my friend. I didn't mean any of it. I was joking. No, Judge Morrison said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the entire courtroom, filled every corner, reached every person. You weren't joking, Mr. Thornton. You were confessing. You were admitting, in your own words, to a premeditated fraud. You were bragging about how successfully you'd manipulated your wife. You were laughing about stealing from her. And even if you were joking, and even if every word of that recording was a lie told to impress your friend, you still did exactly what you described. You still stole her property. You still presented her with a fraudulent settlement. You still planned to take everything while giving her nothing. So no, Mr. Thornton. You can't explain, and even if you could, I don't want to hear it. Sterling tried one more time. Your Honor, my client made mistakes. He used poor judgment. He said things he shouldn't have said. But he's not a criminal. He's a man going through a difficult divorce who made some bad decisions. Bad decisions? Judge Morrison's voice rose slightly. Bad decisions are forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in an argument. What your client did was systematic fraud. He didn't make bad decisions. He executed a plan, a deliberate, calculated, and thoroughly researched plan to defraud his wife of her inheritance. That's not bad judgment, counselor. That's criminal behavior. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm still here. Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Judge Morrison didn't take a recess, didn't consult with her clerk, didn't ask for additional arguments. She'd heard enough, more than enough. She looked at her notes, looked at the documents spread before her, looked at Andrew with undisguised contempt, and rendered her judgment. Here is my ruling. First, the property located at 1247 Maple Street, including the house and all surrounding acreage, all 40 acres, is hereby restored to the sole ownership of Victoria Hayes. This was always her separate property. It was fraudulently transferred. That transfer is void. Mr. Thornton, you have 30 days to vacate the premises, not 60 days, not 90 days, 30 days. If you are not out of Mrs. Hayes's property in 30 days, she has my explicit permission to have you removed by the sheriff's department. Do you understand? Andrew nodded. He looked like he was in shock. Second, the fraudulent title transfer constitutes theft by deception under Arizona law. I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. You may face criminal charges, Mr. Thornton. You may face jail time. You may have a felony conviction on your record. That will be up to the district attorney, but I am recommending prosecution in the strongest possible terms. What you did was not a civil matter. It was a crime. Sterling tried to object, tried to say something about his client's rights, about due process, about how this was all a terrible misunderstanding. Judge Morrison cut him off with a look that could have melted steel. Third, Mrs. Hayes is awarded 50% of all legitimate marital assets. Notice I said legitimate marital assets. I am not including the house, which was never a marital asset. I am not including Mrs. Hayes's trust fund, which was never a marital asset. I am referring only to assets actually acquired during the marriage through the efforts of both parties. Based on my review of the financial disclosures, which I note are probably fraudulent, but I'll work with what we have, that amounts to approximately $400,000 from Mr. Thornton's retirement accounts and investment portfolio. Those accounts will be divided, half to Mrs. Hayes, half to Mr. Thornton. Your Honor, Sterling said, his voice desperate now, high-pitched. That will leave my client with almost nothing. He'll have to start over. He'll be financially devastated. He won't even have a place to live. Then perhaps he should have thought of that before committing fraud, Judge Morrison said. Her voice was cold, absolutely cold. Perhaps he should have thought of that before he married a woman with the specific intent of stealing from her. Perhaps he should have thought of that before he spent 3 years emotionally abusing his wife and making her feel worthless. Perhaps he should have thought of that before he recorded himself bragging about his clever plan to defraud her. Consequences, Mr. Sterling. Actions have consequences. Your client is about to learn that lesson. I'm also ordering Mr. Thornton to pay Mrs. Hayes's legal fees in full. All of them. Is every penny. Mrs. Walters, please submit your final billing to the court and I'll issue the order. Judge Morrison removed her glasses, looked directly at Andrew. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful. Mr. Thornton, you married a woman you thought was poor and powerless. You spent 3 years making her feel worthless. You told her she should be grateful that someone like you would marry someone like her. You mocked her father's profession. You dismissed her career. You isolated her from her friends. You made her believe she was nothing without you. You stole her property and planned to leave her with nothing while you walked away with millions. The irony, the absolute irony, is that she was wealthier than you the entire time. Wealthier in money, yes. Her trust fund alone is worth more than you'll probably earn in your entire career. But more importantly, she was wealthier in character, in kindness, in integrity, in every way that actually matters. Your wife, or rather your soon-to-be ex-wife, is a teacher who changes lives, who helps students, who makes a difference in the world. What do, Mr. Thornton? You shuffle papers, you attend meetings, you manage hospital budgets, and in your free time, apparently, you plan elaborate schemes to defraud vulnerable women. Which one of you is actually contributing to society? Which one of you actually matters? And here's the real tragedy. If you had simply loved her, if you had treated her with respect instead of contempt, if you had valued her for who she was instead of trying to exploit her, you might have had a real life together. You might have had a real marriage. You might have been happy, but you couldn't do that because you're not capable of love. You're only capable of greed. You saw a target instead of a partner, a mark instead of a wife. And now you're going to pay for that. Not just in money, though you'll pay plenty of that, but in reputation, in dignity, in the knowledge that everyone in this courtroom, everyone who hears about this case, everyone who reads the public record will know exactly what you are. A thief, a fraud, a man who married a good woman with the specific intent of destroying her. She paused. Let the words settle. I hope it was worth it, Mr. Thornton. I hope that for the brief moment when you thought you'd succeeded, when you thought you'd pulled off the perfect crime, you felt that thrill was worth what you're about to lose. Because you're going to lose everything. Your money, your reputation, your career, your freedom possibly, and you'll deserve every bit of it. Judge Morrison put her glasses back on. looked at the court clerk. "This court is adjourned." She slammed her gavel. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, like a verdict, like the end of everything Andrew had planned. Andrew sat motionless, in complete shock. Sterling was gathering papers, probably already thinking about how to distance himself from this disaster, how to protect his firm's reputation from being associated with this case. Patricia squeezed Victoria's hand. "You did it," she whispered. "You won." Victoria nodded, but she didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired, relieved, sad, like something had ended, but she wasn't sure what was beginning. They left the courtroom. Margaret hugged Victoria in the hallway. Rachel cried and said she was sorry for doubting her. Patricia said she'd handle all the paperwork, all the follow-up, all the details. Victoria just nodded, thanked them, walked out of the courthouse into October sunshine that felt like the first real sunlight she'd seen in years. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and phone calls and practical matters. Patricia handled most of it. The property title was officially restored to Victoria's name. The retirement accounts were divided. The legal fees were paid by Andrew, as ordered. He vacated the house in 28 days, left without a word. Victoria didn't see him go, didn't want to. She hired a locksmith to change all the locks, hired a cleaning service to deep clean every room, opened every window to let fresh air blow through. She wanted to erase him from the space, from her home, from her life. The district attorney did file criminal charges, theft by deception, fraud. The case was still pending, but Patricia said it was strong, very strong. Andrew might go to prison, might have a felony record, might lose his license to work in hospital administration. Victoria didn't take pleasure in that. She just wanted it to be over. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Victoria learned that Andrew had filed for bankruptcy. His lawyer sent a notice as part of the legal proceedings. Andrew had lost his job at the hospital. The criminal charges had made him toxic. No one in healthcare administration would hire him. He defaulted on his credit cards, his car loan, his luxury apartment lease. The whole carefully constructed image of success and sophistication had been built on debt, on borrowed money, on the appearance of wealth rather than actual wealth. His family's lake house, his parents, who were themselves underwater on the mortgage, the expensive suits bought on credit, the Rolex, a fake purchased online. Everything had been performance, illusion, lies. Victoria felt something when she read the bankruptcy notice. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just sadness. Sadness for who he might have been if he'd chosen differently. Sadness for the life they might have had if he'd been honest. Sadness for everyone who gets trapped in the belief that money and status matter more than character and love. She filed the notice away and went back to her life. Meanwhile, Victoria began rebuilding. She renovated her father's house, hired contractors to repair the roof and update the plumbing and paint the walls in colors that made the rooms feel bright and alive. She kept her father's workshop exactly as it was. Didn't change a single thing. It was a shrine, a memorial, a reminder of where she came from and who loved her. But she added to the house too. She converted the spare bedroom where Andrew had slept during those final weeks into a home office. She tore out her mother's overgrown garden and hired a landscape designer to create something new. A meditation garden with a bench and native plants and a small fountain. A place to think, to remember, to heal. And she built a library, a real library, where her mother's roses used to grow. She built a 2-story addition with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a rolling ladder, a comfortable reading chair by a huge window, a desk where she could work. She filled the shelves with books, every book she'd ever wanted to read but never had time for. Classic literature, modern fiction, poetry, history, philosophy, everything. She quit teaching. It was the hardest decision she'd ever made. She loved her students, loved watching them discover ideas and fall in love with literature and learn to think critically. But she'd been teaching for 10 years. She'd changed lives. She'd made a difference. And now she had the opportunity to make a different kind of difference, a bigger difference. She started a foundation, the Thomas Hayes Foundation, named for her father, for the man who'd cleaned floors and fixed broken things and loved her enough to plan for a future he wouldn't see. The foundation's mission was simple: provide college scholarships to children of blue-collar workers, to kids whose parents were janitors and custodians and maintenance workers and line cooks and truck drivers and everyone else who did the hard, necessary, often invisible work that kept society functioning, to kids who were smart and hardworking but didn't have money, to kids who'd been told college wasn't for people like them, to kids like Victoria had been. The first year, they gave out 10 scholarships, $5,000 each, enough to cover a year of community college or make a significant dent in university tuition. Victoria interviewed every applicant personally, read their essays, listened to their stories, saw herself in every one of them. Kids who'd been underestimated, kids who'd been told to be realistic, kids who'd been told that success wasn't for people from their background. She told them they were wrong, told them that their background didn't define their future, told them that someone believed in them. She told them about her father, about how he'd worked as a janitor but had been brilliant, about how he'd invested carefully and planned wisely and protected her, about how the world had underestimated him because of his job, but he'd been smarter than almost everyone she'd ever met. She told them that blue collar didn't mean less than, that working with your hands didn't mean you didn't work with your mind, that their parents' jobs were honorable and important and nothing to be ashamed of. And she told them about her own experience, about marrying someone who looked down on her father, who mocked her career, who made her feel worthless, about how she'd almost let someone else define her value, about how she'd learned that the only person who can make you feel inferior is yourself. The students listened. Some cried, some thanked her, some said she'd changed their lives, and Victoria felt purpose, felt meaning, felt like she was honoring her father's legacy in exactly the way he would have wanted. By the third year, the foundation was giving out 50 scholarships. By the fifth year, 100. Victoria hired a small staff, rented office space downtown, set up partnerships with schools and community organizations, created mentorship programs where scholarship recipients were paired with professionals in their fields of interest, started a summer internship program that gave students real-world experience. The foundation grew, and as it grew, when Victoria grew too, she became someone new, not the grieving daughter who'd lost her father, not the abused wife who'd been made to feel worthless, not even the determined woman who'd fought back in court. Someone else. Someone who'd taken everything she'd learned, everything she'd survived, everything she'd been given, and turned it into something that mattered. 6 years after the divorce, the Thomas Hayes Foundation had given out over 500 scholarships, totaling more than $2 million. They'd helped students become doctors and lawyers and teachers and engineers and entrepreneurs. They'd changed lives, changed trajectories, changed the world in small but meaningful ways. Victoria sat in her library one evening, looking out at her meditation garden, thinking about everything that had happened, about her father, about her mother, about Andrew, about the courtroom, about Judge Morrison's words, about the journey from there to here, and she realized something. She'd been telling people for years that Andrew had done her a favor, that being underestimated was a gift, that his betrayal had freed her to become who she was meant to be. But that wasn't quite right. Andrew hadn't done her a favor. Her father had. Her father had loved her enough to protect her, to plan for her, to believe in her, to teach her that her worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's opinion. Andrew had tried to destroy her, but he couldn't, because her father had built something stronger than Andrew could break. Victoria saw Andrew one last time, 6 years after the divorce was finalized. She was at a coffee shop near the courthouse, meeting with a student the foundation was sponsoring, a bright young woman named Ashley who wanted to study engineering. Ashley was telling her about her acceptance letters, about the full scholarship to MIT, about how she couldn't believe this was real, that someone believed in her enough to invest in her future. Victoria was smiling, genuinely happy. This was why she did what she did, this moment, this realization in a young person's eyes that they mattered, that they were worthy, that someone saw their potential. The door opened. A man walked in. Cheaper suit, the kind you buy at a department store during a sale. Tired eyes with dark circles underneath. Hair grayer than she remembered. Shoulders slumped. He moved slowly, like someone who'd been beaten down by life. He saw her and froze. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, all the history between them, all the lies and manipulation and betrayal, all the pain he'd caused, all the damage he'd tried to do, but also all the strength she'd found, all the growth, all the ways she'd turned his attempted destruction into something beautiful. Andrew's face went through several expressions: shock, shame, something that might have been regret. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he said, "Victoria." His voice was different, smaller, uncertain. "Can we talk? Just for a minute. I know I don't deserve it, but..." She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd spent 3 years trying to make her feel worthless. This man who'd stolen from her, who'd lied to her, who'd planned to destroy her, and she felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction at seeing him diminished, not even pity, just nothing. He was irrelevant, a chapter in her life that was closed, a lesson learned but not a defining moment. "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Andrew." She said it kindly, not cruelly, just matter-of-factly. "I hope you figure things out. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. But we're done. We've been done for 6 years. And then..." She turned back to Ashley, who was still talking about her college plans, her excitement, her gratitude, her future. She gave the girl her full attention, her full presence, her full support. Andrew stood there for another moment. She could feel him behind her, could sense his hesitation, his desire to say something more, but there was nothing more to say. Finally, she heard him walk away, heard the door close, heard his footsteps fade. She didn't turn around, didn't watch him leave, didn't give him any more of her time or energy or attention. Because the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's living so well they become irrelevant. It's building a life so full and meaningful and purposeful that their absence isn't even noticed. It's becoming so completely yourself that their opinion, their judgment, their presence or absence simply doesn't matter. 10 years after the divorce, Victoria sat in her library on a Saturday morning. The Thomas Hayes Foundation had just announced its 1,000th scholarship recipient. 1,000 students whose lives had been changed, who'd been given opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise, who'd been told they mattered. The foundation had grown beyond anything Victoria had imagined. They'd expanded to other states, had partnered with major universities, had attracted donors and sponsors and corporate partnerships, had become a model for other scholarship programs. But Victoria still interviewed students personally, still read their essays, still told them about her father, still made sure they understood that they were worthy, not because of the scholarship, but because of who they were. She thought about her journey, from the daughter of a janitor to a teacher, to an abused wife, to a divorced woman, to a philanthropist. From someone who'd been made to feel worthless to someone who changed lives. From someone who'd been underestimated to someone who'd exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. And she realized that every part of the journey had been necessary, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts. Andrew's betrayal had hurt, had been devastating, had made her question everything about herself, but it had also freed her, had forced her to find strength she didn't know she had pushed her to discover who she really was beneath all the labels and judgments and opinions, had given her a story that helped other people see their own strength. She wouldn't thank Andrew, would never suggest that what he did was okay or justified or forgivable. He'd tried to destroy her, had planned deliberately to steal from her and leave her with nothing. That was unforgivable, but she also wouldn't let him define her, wouldn't let that 3-year marriage be the most important part of her story, because it wasn't. The most important part was what came after, the foundation, the students, the lives changed, the difference made. That was her story, not what Andrew did to her, but what she did in response. Not how he tried to define her, but how she defined herself. Not who he said she was, but who she chose to become. Her phone buzzed, a text from Patricia, who'd become one of her closest friends over the years. They had lunch once a month, talked about life and plans and dreams. Patricia had retired from family law and now volunteered with the foundation, helping students navigate legal questions about financial aid and scholarships and contracts. The text said, "Just heard from Ashley. She got the internship at NASA. Your student is going to work at NASA. You change lives, Victoria. Don't forget that." Victoria smiled, texted back, "We change lives. You, me, Margaret, Rachel, everyone who believes in these kids. It takes a village. But she knew what Patricia meant. It knew that the foundation existed because of her father's foresight and her determination and the resources that had been protected for exactly this purpose. Knew that she'd taken something meant to destroy her and turned it into something that built up hundreds of others. That evening, Victoria walked through her house, her father's house, her house. She ran her hand along the walls her father had painted, sat in her father's chair in the workshop, looked at the tools he'd organized so carefully. The calendar still showing April 2018, his coffee mug, his reading glasses. She could still feel him there, could still hear his voice. "Trust yourself, Vicky. You're stronger than you know," she whispered to the empty room. "I know now, Dad, I know. I'm strong, I'm worthy, I'm enough. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for teaching me what really matters." She went upstairs to her library, pulled a book from the shelf, one of her father's favorites, To Kill a Mockingbird. She'd read it 100 times, taught it for 10 years, but it meant something different now. She understood Atticus Finch differently, understood the quiet dignity of doing the right thing when everyone else is watching, understood that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes courage is quiet. Sometimes it's just showing up every day and doing the work and believing in something bigger than yourself. She opened the book to her favorite passage, the one she'd underlined and annotated and read to students over and over. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it. She'd always loved that passage, always taught it as a lesson in empathy, in understanding, in seeing the world through other people's eyes. But now she understood something else. You can't let other people's point of view define you. You can't let their perception become your reality. You have to know who you are independently of how others see you. Have to be secure enough in yourself that someone else's judgment, someone else's dismissal, someone else's contempt doesn't shake your foundation. Her father had known that, had lived that, had been underestimated his entire life, but had never let that change how he saw himself. Had worked as a janitor, but had known his worth wasn't defined by his job title, had been looked down on, but had looked up at himself. Mick had been dismissed, but had never dismissed himself, and he'd taught her that. Not through lectures or lessons, but through example, through living with dignity and purpose and quiet strength, through loving her unconditionally, while also preparing her to stand on her own, through protecting her while also believing she was strong enough to protect herself. She closed the book, looked out the window at the 40 acres her father had protected, at the land that Andrew had tried to steal, at the space that now housed not just a home, but a headquarters for a foundation that changed lives. And she thought about all the students who'd benefited, all the families who'd been given hope, all the lives that had been altered because one man, a janitor, had loved his daughter enough to plan for a future he wouldn't see. That was legacy. Not money in a bank account, not property, not things, but impact, influence. The ripple effects of one person's love and wisdom and careful planning extending out through generations. Her father had changed hundreds of lives through her, and she would change thousands more. That was wealth, real wealth, the kind that mattered, the kind that lasted, the kind that couldn't be stolen or lost or taken away. She picked up her journal. She'd started keeping it after the divorce, on Patricia's advice, writing down her thoughts, her feelings, her progress, her gratitude. She wrote, 10 years ago, I was married to a man who tried to destroy me, who married me specifically to steal from me, who spent 3 years making me feel worthless. I thought that was the defining moment of my life. I was wrong. The defining moment was what I chose to do afterward, how I chose to respond, who I chose to become. I could have been bitter, angry, cynical, closed off. I could have let Andrew's betrayal make me hard, make me suspicious of everyone, make me believe that people are fundamentally selfish and cruel. But I didn't. Because my father taught me better. He taught me that one person's cruelty doesn't define humanity, that being hurt doesn't mean you have to hurt others, that the best response to someone trying to diminish you is to become bigger, not smaller. So I built something that honors Dad, something that helps people, something that matters. And in building it, I rebuilt myself. I'm not the woman I was 10 years ago. I'm not even the woman I was 6 years ago when I last saw Andrew. I'm someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows her worth, someone who isn't afraid of being underestimated because she knows the truth about herself, Someone who uses what she has, not to prove anything to anyone, but to make a difference. That's who I am now, and I like her. I'm proud of her. I think Dad would be proud of her too. She closed the journal, turned off the lights, went to bed in the house where she'd grown up. The house her father had bought for $50,000 in 1985. The house that had been her sanctuary and her burden and her inheritance and her home. And she slept peacefully, without nightmares, without anger, without regret, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all: the people who underestimate you are doing you a favor. They're getting out of your way. They're showing you who they really are. They're giving you the motivation to prove something to yourself. Not to them, they don't matter, but to yourself, to prove that you're stronger than you thought, braver than you believed, more capable than anyone told you. And that's the real victory. Not the courtroom, not the money, not the justice, but the knowledge that you survived, that you thrived, that you turned someone's attempt to destroy you into a reason to build something beautiful. That's the story. Not the villain's plan, but the hero's response. Not the betrayal, but the recovery. Not the pain, but the purpose that came from it. Thank you so much for watching Victoria's story. If someone in your life needs to hear this, that being underestimated isn't the end, but often the beginning. Please share this video. Being dismissed isn't a verdict on your worth, but sometimes a blessing in disguise. The people who underestimate you often reveal more about themselves than they do about you. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and what part of this story resonated most with you. Was it Victoria's patience in waiting for the right moment? Her father's quiet wisdom in protecting her? The justice of the courtroom scene? Her grace in that final encounter with Andrew? Or perhaps the foundation and the legacy she built? We read every single comment, and we love hearing from you. Your thoughts, your stories, your experiences matter to us. They remind us why we tell these stories. They remind us that we're all connected by the struggles we face and the strength we find. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about people who refused to stay down. People who were counted out but came back stronger. People who were underestimated but proved everyone wrong, not because they needed external validation, but because they needed to prove something to themselves. We share these stories because we believe they matter. Because we believe that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to accept someone else's limited vision of who you are. Because we believe that your worth isn't determined by who values you, but by how you value yourself. Until next time, remember this: the people who underestimate you are doing you a favor. They're getting out of your way. They're showing you who they really are before you waste too much time on them. They're giving you the gift of clarity, and sometimes they're giving you the motivation to prove them spectacularly wrong. Not because you need their approval, not because you need their validation, not because you need to show them anything, but because you need to prove something to yourself, that you're stronger than you thought, braver than you believed, more capable than anyone told you, more valuable than anyone made you feel. Victoria's father was right. True character is revealed when someone discovers you have everything. Some people will celebrate with you. Some will support you. Some will be genuinely happy for your success. And some will reveal themselves as the frauds they always were. People who only valued you when they thought you were beneath them. People who only respected you when they thought you needed them. People who only loved you when they thought they were doing you a favor. Those people don't deserve your time, don't deserve your energy, don't deserve space in your life or your mind or your heart. Let them go. Not with anger, not with bitterness, not with a need for revenge, but with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and being comfortable with that. Let them go and build something beautiful, something meaningful, something that honors the people who truly loved you and believed in you and protected you. Build a life that reflects your values, not their judgments. Build a legacy that matters, not to them, but to the people you help and the difference you make and the person you become. That's not revenge. That's self-respect. And sometimes self-respect is the most powerful thing you can have. Victoria Hayes understood that. And now, maybe you do too.